1992 was a year of change in the motor racing world.
Paul Page, you have no idea how right you were. It's not often that one year witnessed so much change in the motorsports world. One year in particular had many events happening in various forms of racing all around the globe that shaped those forms of racing for years to come. Legends began to retire, eras came to an end, stars briefly shined, and new ideas came into existence, all within 1 year. Some forms of racing are still feeling the effects of that particular year to this day. It's time to discuss 1992, the year that changed racing. We'll start with some of the oddities from 1992. Nissan won the Bathurst 1000 in Australia for the second year in a row, with Mark Skaife and Jim Richards driving the Skyline GTR. This result was controversial, as the winning car had an accident during a rainstorm that necessitated the use of a red flag to stop the race. Skaife and Richards won the race on countback. Denny Hulme also lost his life in this race from a heart attack while he was behind the wheel of a BMW.
More to go than this. This is bloody disgraceful. I'll keep racing, but I tell you what, this is going to remain with me for a long time. You're a pack of arseholes.
In drag racing, Kenny Bernstein broke the 300-mile-per-hour barrier at the Gator Nationals at Gainesville in March with a quarter-mile speed of 301.70 miles per hour in his top fuel dragster.
Only the second man in NHRA history to win 4 consecutive Winston Funny Car titles between 1985 and 1988. This time, the scoreboards recorded one of the all-time great performances in drag racing.
As speeds increased on the drag strip, they also increased on road courses around the world as sports cars became faster and faster. Let's dive into sports car racing in 1992. First, let's focus on the World SportsCar Championship and Le Mans. The top tier of sports car racing worldwide ran to the Group C formula introduced by the FIA for 1982. It was a fuel consumption formula, and Porsche mastered it at first, winning the 24 Hours of Le Mans from 1982 through 1987. More manufacturers got involved, and Porsche's dominance was threatened as the 1980s came to a close. Jaguar won Le Mans in 1988 and 1990, with the Mercedes-powered Sauber winning in 1989. Mazda won Le Mans in 1991 with the 787B, which was the first Japanese car and the first rotary engine-powered car to win Le Mans. However, change was on the horizon as the FIA decided to make Group C into more of a formula series, with new rules calling for naturally aspirated 3.5-liter engines, which were the same rules used in Formula One. Manufacturers developed new cars, which were much more expensive and also much quicker, almost Formula One quick. Realizing this, manufacturers like Peugeot and Mercedes dipped out of sports cars and took their development work and applied it to Formula One. Peugeot never won an F1 race, while Mercedes, well, you know the rest of that story. Because of the reduction in entries, 1993's World SportsCar Championship was cancelled. Peugeot won Le Mans in 1992 and 1993 before Group C cars were no longer allowed to compete at Le Mans. Afterward, we got a hodgepodge of prototypes and GT/GT1 cars in the mid to late 1990s before the rise of LMP1 cars in the early 2000s. Moving to America, IMSA's GTP category had been dominated by Porsche in the mid-1980s. Once Nissan started winning, they won 4 titles in a row from 1988 through 1991. However, Dan Gurney's All-American Racers got their Toyota Eagle figured out, and that car won 9 races in 1992, including the last 7 races in a row. Jaguar and Nissan then decided that it was time to leave IMSA. Toyota then won 10 out of 11 races in 1993, as that car was just that dominant. The only race it didn't win was Road America, which All-American Racers never entered. IMSA then shut down the GTP championship after 1993, and its successor would eventually morph into the American Le Mans series. And then there was that whole deal with Grand Am, and then they eventually got back together. Moving further around the globe, The All Japan Sports Prototype Championship had some of the most spirited battles in sports cars, with Porsches battling against Mazdas, Nissans, and Toyotas in the 1980s and early 1990s. After the collapse of the Group C formula and the downturn in the Japanese economy, that championship became the All Japan Grand Touring Car Championship, which eventually became Super GT. The Group C rules, mandating 3.5-liter naturally aspirated engines similar to Formula One cars, give us a great segue to transition to Formula One in 1992. The 1991 Williams FW14 had reliability issues that crippled Nigel Mansell's hopes of his first World Championship that season. Williams Grand Prix Engineering developed that car into 1992's FW14B, giving Mansell and teammate Riccardo Patrese several electronic driver aids, such as a semi-automatic transmission, traction control, anti-lock brakes, and most importantly, active suspension. The car was able to adjust its ride height based on the circuit's characteristics, and Williams spent 5 years working on maximizing the benefits of this system. Mansell proceeded to curb stomp the field, scoring 14 poles and winning 9 out of that season's 16 races. The car was so dominant so early that season that McLaren pushed the race debut of their new car, the MP47, up to the Brazilian Grand Prix, which was the third race of the season, instead of the fourth race that year in Spain. Mansell dominated that year, but wasn't entirely happy in Formula One. Mansell and Williams had a falling out, particularly after Williams signed Alain Prost as a driver for the 1993 F1 season. Mansell announced he would be leaving Formula One for the 1993 season, but more on that later. Williams dominated in 1992 and again in 1993, winning both drivers' and constructors' championships. The FIA acted on this domination, voting in 1993 to ban the previously mentioned driver aids for the 1994 season. The 1994 Williams was an evolution of a car designed for electronic driver aids and was a handful to drive early in the season. It was also the car in which Ayrton Senna tragically lost his life at that year's San Marino Grand Prix. His death led to a safety crusade that kept death out of Formula One for the better part of 2 decades. Back to Mansell. He announced his Formula One departure at the 1992 Italian Grand Prix. On September 18, 1992, Newman Haas Racing announced that they signed Nigel Mansell to drive for the team in the 1993 Kart PPG IndyCar World Series. That's 30 years ago from this video's debut on YouTube. Mansell attended the final IndyCar race of the 1992 season and was Mario Andretti's teammate the following year. Mansell drove the number 5 Lola Ford Cosworth for the team co-owned by actor Paul Newman and racing businessman Carl Haas. Mansell would win on his IndyCar debut in Surfers Paradise, Australia. He won 4 more races en route to winning the 1993 IndyCar Championship, despite sitting out of one race due to an injury. Mansell's 1994 IndyCar campaign was much less successful due to the dominance of Team Penske that year, leading Mansell to go back to Formula One to help Williams after Senna's death. Mansell then retired from racing full-time in 1995. Before Newman Haas announced Mansell, the team was involved in a spirited IndyCar Championship battle that season. Let's dive into IndyCar racing in 1992. For the 1992 season, Ford rejoined IndyCar racing as an engine supplier, badging Cosworth's new XB engine. Newman Haas Racing and Chip Ganassi Racing ran the new engine in a Lola chassis. Lola actually designed a variant of their 1992 car, the T9200, specifically for the new Ford engine, as they had done for the Buicks for Indianapolis. The Chevrolet engine that had won the last 4 Indianapolis 500s was more available in 1992. The engine was available in the Indy V8A specification, as Ilmor improved the engine into a B specification exclusively for Team Penske to use. Roger Penske, after all, was, and I believe still is, a co-owner of Ilmor. Buick ran a few races in kart that season, plus the USAC-sanctioned Indianapolis 500. The older Cosworth engine that won the Indianapolis 500 from 1978 through 1987 still ran uncompetitively in kart, scoring its best finish of 7th that season in Detroit. On the chassis side of things, True Sports Racing ran their own chassis in 1992, as did Team Penske. Rick Gallus's team designed a car called the Galmer for Al Unser Jr. and Danny Sullivan. The car's name was a combination of names between Gallus and Alan Mertens, the car's chief designer. The Galmer was competitive on road and street circuits, and Unser Jr. also won that year's Indianapolis 500 in the closest finish in Indianapolis 500 history to date. With 10 top 5 finishes in the first 14 races of the 1992 season, Unser Jr. was leading the kart IndyCar points heading to the penultimate race of the season in Nazareth. That's when Gallus Racing ran an experimental car that was modified to suit the new 1993 chassis regulations at Nazareth.
It's built to 93 specifications, and now it seems quite a gamble to take, but is that the gamble you have to take for the championship?
Well, we're trying to make the Galmer better for next year, and you know, we shouldn't be testing it at a racetrack like this, but we felt it was best, and you know, we missed a little bit. That's why we're back here. So.
This was all despite Rick Gallus deciding to shelve the 1993 Galmer project over 3.5 months ago in Indianapolis. Maybe it was a last-ditch effort to sell cars for 1993. Who knows? Either way, Unser Jr. finished 11th and 9th in the final 2 races that year and finished 3rd in the championship. Michael Andretti won 5 times in 1992, but the new Ford engine had teething issues, causing several early season retirements. Andretti finished 2nd in the points to Bobby Rahal, who won 4 races. Rahal had 2 retirements the whole season and finished in the top 6 12 times. Rahal's win at Nazareth was his final win as an IndyCar driver. For 1993, Rahal would compete with the True Sports chassis, rebadging it as a Rahal-Hogan RH001. Despite finishing 2nd at Long Beach, Rahal failed to qualify for the 1993 Indianapolis 500 and ran a 1993 Lola the rest of the season, while Michael Andretti was trying his hand in Formula One before coming back to IndyCar for 1994. Speaking of the Indianapolis 500, the 1992 running marked a shift in IndyCar's direction. Mainly because of all the lower extremity injuries suffered during the 500, rules were changed regarding chassis construction, mandating an additional bulkhead and for the driver's feet to be located behind the center line of the front wheels. That 500 was also the final one for Rick Mears, Tom Sneva, and Gordon Johncock. A.J. Foyt intended on racing the 1993 Indianapolis 500, but decided to retire that year on pole day. More old faces were fading away, as Al Unser Sr., Johnny Rutherford, and Mario Andretti would soon call time on their racing careers shortly thereafter. Buick also withdrew their factory support for racing. In the fall of 1992, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway underwent a massive overhaul, with new walls, fencing, and a warm-up lane to allow drivers to enter and exit the track in a safe manner. IMS has this configuration to this day. That work took place after a NASCAR tire test to determine if it was feasible for NASCAR to race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. As such, let's talk about NASCAR in 1992. First and foremost, it was Richard Petty's last season. The King was ready to put his crown on the shelf, and 1992 was announced as the Fan Appreciation Tour, with special appearances, lots of photographs to take, and a lot of autographs to sign. In July, Petty led the first few laps of the Pepsi 400 at Daytona to large cheers from the crowd.
That's magic, Ned. Yes, sir. That was great. Absolutely great.
The familiar wet towel sticking out of the mouth of Richard Petty. Looking in the rearview mirrors to see everybody behind.
At the season finale in Atlanta, Petty was involved in a wreck on the main straight that seemed to knock the number 43 Pontiac out of the race. However, the Petty Enterprises crew worked on the car, and Petty finished the final race of the season and his career. That race was also Jeff Gordon's first in NASCAR Cup Series competition, and it decided a championship battle that went down to the wire. Let's talk about what led to that point. Dale Earnhardt had won the previous 2 NASCAR championships, and eventually he would win the 2 championships after. But in 1992, the man in black won only 1 race that whole year, the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway in May. Instead of Earnhardt fighting for the title, there were 3 main drivers in contention as the season progressed: Davey, Allison, Bill Elliott, and Alan Kulwicki. All 3 drove Ford Thunderbirds, which were on another level that year. Beginning with the fall 1991 race at Charlotte Motor Speedway, Ford had a 13-race win streak between Allison, Elliott, Kulwicki, Mark Martin, and Jeff Bodine. Allison won 5 races in 1992, but a number of incidents during the season hurt the Alabama native's position in the points. The incident started with rib and neck injuries from an April crash at Bristol. Allison won the next week at North Wilkesboro. The very next week at Martinsville, there was another accident where Allison aggravated those injuries. Allison won the next week at Talladega. Wreck, win. Wreck, win. At the very next race, Allison did both at the same time, crashing across the finish line at the Winston, a non-points All-Star race, when Allison suffered a concussion when his helmet hit the wall. That crash was a part of a history-making evening. Let's give it a brief glance. NASCAR's All-Star race was on life support after the 1991 running, and series sponsor R.J. Reynolds decided that they didn't want to run the race in 1992. Humpy Wheeler said the magic words that then saved the race.
I said, how about we run it at night? He looked at me like I'd just fallen off the turnip truck.
Charlotte Motor Speedway turned to Musco Lighting to help light the speedway, and feedback was positive after an open test. The Speedway promoted the event as one hot night, and the lights shined on NASCAR's brightest stars. With a lot of money on the line, Earnhardt and Kyle Petty went door to door on the final lap before one of the most pivotal finishes in NASCAR history.
He's up to Earnhardt's bumper. Earnhardt takes it.
They're on the racing service down on the flat part of the racetrack.
And it's Kyle Petty. Kyle Petty coming to the checkered flag. Here comes Davey Allison to the bottom. It'll be the finish everybody was waiting for it. They crashed past the finish line. They have crashed into turn number 1. And Davey Allison is in a shower of sparks.
Allison had a brief recovery from that incident and finished 4th at the Coca-Cola 600 1 week later. 6 races later, Allison survived a savage series of flips at Pocono Raceway in July, popping blood vessels in his eyes that left them bloodshot. That year, Allison had more ups and downs than your average roller coaster. As for Elliott, he had a strong spring that season, but he also had a horrible fall run with 4 finishes of 26th or worse in the 5 races leading up to the season finale in Atlanta. Those finishes, combined with Allison's win at the penultimate race in Phoenix, gave Allison the points lead. Meanwhile, Kulwicki clawed his way out of a humongous hole in the points to sit only 30 points behind Allison heading to Atlanta, having been very consistent through much of the year. The 1992 Hooters 500 story has been told numerous times in other videos about how Kulwicki won the championship. Instead, let's look at the fallout from the 1992 NASCAR season. Jack Sellers' 40th place finish at Sonoma in June 1992 was Buick's last finish in NASCAR in a race that took place the same day NASCAR founder Bill France Sr. passed away. Oldsmobile got their final NASCAR Cup Series wins in 1992, with Harry Gant winning at Dover in May and Michigan in August, before making their final appearance in Cup in 1993. Junior Johnson's team got one more win with Bill Elliott in the 1994 Southern 500 before Brett Bodine started driving for the team in 1995. Johnson sold the team outright to Bodine late in 1995, and Bodine drove for himself until folding the team in 2003. Tragically, Alan Kulwicki died in a plane crash in April of 1993. Just a few months later, Davey Allison perished in a helicopter accident at Talladega Superspeedway. After Robbie Gordon and Lake Speed both raced for Robert Yates Racing, Ernie Irvin got the call to replace Allison. Talk about a cruel twist of fate. Allison had collided with Irvin in Atlanta, ending Allison's championship bid. Now, Irvin had the ride of the driver that collided with him, but Irvin soon had his own cruel twist of fate after a crash in Michigan in August of 1994 that sidelined him through most of 1995. As for the Winston, running it at night likely saved the race, although the format and eligibility requirements have changed very frequently through the years, as has the venue in the most recent years. The NASCAR Championship format changed significantly as well, but that video's been done already. With that, I think we have a good overview of how pivotal 1992 was in motorsports history. Many events took place that defined careers and legacies all around the globe, and I feel like this was something that should be told in more detail. If there's something you feel I missed, let me know below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, drop a comment down below, give it a like, subscribe, click that little bell, all the usual stuff every person on YouTube says. If you didn't like the video, hey, that's cool too. Leave me a comment, let me know why. I can deal with it. Thanks for everyone that followed along through this journey, and I hope you enjoyed this trip down memory lane. I'm Christopher DeHardy, and hopefully I'll see y'all at the racetrack or maybe in another video sometime.